To the Strength and Knowledge podcast. I'm here with the three best friends. I'm Marshall Bennett. Today we are going to talk about what factors we consider when programming, for example, space, stress, equipment, etc., anything along those lines. Again, before we start going off of it, please feel free to comment, share our stuff. Let's talk about it. Let's get rocking and rolling. Aaron, you go ahead and take it away.
I'll go ahead. I'll start going off with like the space. I mean, I feel like that's something what you kind of don't even think about it until you're actually at the space where you're at. If it's whatever private sector, college, high school, you have that set plan, but then you kind of realize it because I don't know about you guys, but every time I've been to a place, like, okay, well, you're programming in right as soon as you get there. So it's kind of like, well, yeah, I have a game plan, but I really don't know until I get there to see how many athletes I have in that small space. Luckily enough, I've been at pretty nice universities, pretty big spaces, to allow myself to have the ability to do a lot of things. Especially right now, I'm at in the high school. It's I only have six squat racks, three squat stands, and it's really nice compared to other high schools. But that's just 9 places, 9 bars. There's only one set of dumbbells. Unfortunately, we do not have any bands at the moment. They're all pretty torn up. So I have to be very creative of just knowing how I can program to be able to use the barbell, to be able to kind of keep the flow moving. Because if it's in my class or after school for lifting, I want to get a lot of done in that hour, 45 minutes, whatever we're doing in the weight room. Because we also take if it's a warm up, we do a 5 or 10 minute warm up. Sometimes we jump and sprint before we go lift. So it's a lot of things moving, and I'm just trying to make it as efficient as possible. Where one of the examples where I did was I had my football team where they were after school, so it was all the entire football team in our high school weight room, and it was about, I don't know, probably 50 or 60 guys, and we only have 3 adjustable benches. The other ones are just straight flat from Rogue, and at the moment it was, we bench pressed, then we did an accessory bench press, like a dumbbell movement. It was an incline movement, and all of a sudden I'm like, after about a week of it, I was like, I wasn't able to keep doing that because there's only 3 adjustable benches while everyone else had flat. So I changed it to a dumbbell Z press, knowing what anybody could do that press on their butt with dumbbells. And then on top of it, I came to the high school with COVID. So we also had to make it more spacey. Kind of how I went with it was we did our warm up for our smaller groups. I was still able to have 2 groups. I would have one group do the main lift and the other group go outside and do their accessories. Then 10, 15 minutes would switch. If it was like a bigger group, like for football, all we did was warm up together. Then we split into we had 3 stations. So I had a coach run the pliers, a jump training. Then I had another coach in the hallway I brought out dumbbells, whatever we were using. I had him do some dumbbell accessories, and I always had the main lift in the weight room with me. So can't complain because we were able to train with the COVID restrictions. Obviously, it wasn't ideal, but in that situation, I felt like it was pretty ideal to have 3 movements and to flip around. And I kind of took that because at my time when I was at SIU, we redid our weight room, and we moved a lot of racks, dumbbells, and everything, our platforms, to the rec center. And I kind of took that idea where we had, if it was a football team, that's our biggest team there. So we had split up 3 groups. We had a coach down there, dumbbell station. Let's say we had our skills down there. Then at the main lift, we had our bigs, and we were doing that main lift on the racks. Then we had our medium guys, our linebackers, tight ends at the platforms doing their Olympic movement. That's kind of how we moved it from Olympic to main movement to dumbbells, and just kind of had rotating. So I kind of used that example, what I did at SIU. And once I got to the high school during COVID, I was like, boom, I can just go ahead and do 3 stations, have them just rotate 10, 15 minutes each, and just keep it rolling and keep it as fluent and keep it as just flowing of nonstop moving. And now I'm having the ability to have smaller class sizes. So yes, now it's not necessarily a issue of space. Now it's kind of just that same thing of I got 9 racks. I only got 1 bar per rack, which I feel like is a game changer because we were lucky at Iowa. We had 2 bars, 2 racks. Even when I was at SIU, we had Olympic bars and power bars. So that's something where you kind of don't realize how nice that is to do a main movement, then go right into a landmine press or landmine something, and not even think about going from Olympic movement right into that main movement. Where now I have to do a clean day with our RFEs because usually I do cleans and we go bench. That's kind of how I used to do my programs. But now with only having 1 bar at a rack, it's if we get the bar out of the rack, do our cleans, and we got to put that bar back into for bench, just taking, even though it takes extra 2 or 3 minutes, that's still time what we could be training. So that's why I started doing my cleans on my rear foot elevated split squats gay because me, I'm a big single leg trainer. I hate bilateral squats. So, but yeah, I guess that's what I've been dealing with my space. I think that's something what every coach needs to think about, especially the space, the equipment, the flow of the weight room.
There any talks about like expanding or like growing your guys' weight room or anything like that, or is that like
Um,
a couple years down the line or what?
they've been pretty good with like if I need something, they were working with me, communicating with me. But hopefully down the line we can get something big going. Who knows what that is though?
Nice. All right, Sam,
Fair
what do you?
enough. Me? Well, I kind of break down those extra factors into a couple, like 2 different kind of sections. There's what Aaron just touched on with the space and equipment that you have, which I think are like the constants because they're usually not going to change, or if they're going to change, they're not going to change like a lot, like overnight. Then you have the changing variables where that's how each individual athlete is feeling, how the team is feeling, how the accumulated stress over time, what they're doing outside the weight room, outside of their sport practice, whether it's in their social life or in their classwork life. It's all affecting them one way or another, whether they get enough sleep or not enough sleep, or how they're eating. Everything like that plays a part in how we train our athletes. I don't remember where I picked it up from, but I remember one coach telling me that, and maybe it was when I was with you guys, that when you can kind of tell the general energy levels of the team in the first few minutes before the warm up. If they're like talking and having fun and messing around, then they're feeling good for the day, and you can kind of push them if you want to or if you have to. If they're dead silent, they might just be tired. They might just be beat up, not really ready to go. And sometimes you can kind of work them into getting into it like a good rhythm and change it, turn it around, get into a good session. But sometimes they're just beat up and they may not be as good for a session if you're thinking about going heavy than you would like. So it kind of goes into those 2 sections, the things that change a lot, the things that change very little. uh there are So you can like program around the things that change very little, kind of the way that Aaron said, just taking inventory of what you have, the amount of space you have, the amount of equipment you have per person, per team, etc. But then with the changeable things that are going to be different every team, every session, every day, every week, every hour, it's just going to be different, where you can program to try to kind of make that a constant, or kind of manipulate it to have good days and slow days, I guess, when you can or when you want to. So it's like James Smith created the high-low programming. I learned a lot about that when I was down south, and so it's just basing everything off of your CNS or your athlete's CNS. So you usually never want to follow a high CNS day with another high CNS day. You want to be able to give your central nervous system a break to be able to come back and hit hard when you want to. So it's kind of being able to tell when they're going to feel good and when you can push them, and trying to manipulate when you can actually push them a little bit harder through the amount of volume and intensity that you prescribe in your training. So I kind of think of, it may be tempting on a low day when they come in and they're talking a whole lot and they're having fun and they're messing around, and you're thinking, okay, well, they're actually ready to go. Let's push them a little bit harder today. It may be tempting sometimes to do that, but it's pretty tough to kind of just have to hold yourself back and not push them too far, because you're going to have something heavier coming up later in the week or the next day or something like that. So you want to let them feel good for that day. And then, of course, maybe sport practice, maybe life and classes and exams and stuff are going to change how they feel by the next day when you try to go heavier or more intense or more volume. But it can at least kind of physically set you up to have a better day when you want to. So I kind of think about that in the way that I think in a video that I saw with Matt Wenning, he was talking about maxing out or having a max effort day in training versus competition, how to get as close to your actual true 100% as you can in competition. And he said something like, in powerlifting in your whole career, you may have 1 to 3 times throughout your entire career where you hit an actual true 100%, had nothing left, lift, and left it all on the platform. You may have 1 to 3 times in your whole life to do that. And so thinking about that is kind of like, how do you equate that into training our athletes? Well, you can try to give them a little bit of a lower CNS state and build them up and get them on that high day when you want them to be at. But it all comes down to having that communication with your athletes and the kind of social skills that you pick up as a coach that are kind of a little bit more specific to a coach. Just being able to read a whole group of people and understand like how individuals interact with each other on the team, and saying, well, maybe these guys aren't talking to each other today. Maybe they're in a fight yesterday or something like that. And you go up to them with what happened. And so it's just kind of trying to organize your training around your athletes and not trying to organize your athletes around your training. Being able to get the most out of them with the time that you can. It's kind of like a training density type thing. If you want to have more effective, higher density training that will produce more results, you kind of want to be able to let the athletes go at their pace to a certain extent, than forcing it and saying, well, we have heavy squats today. We have heavy single leg Hatfield split squats today. So we're just going to go heavy, and that's what we're going to do. And it doesn't matter how you feel. I don't care. We just have to do it today. And it's like, taking that approach can be all right for their training numbers and stuff like that. But when they go into practice or they go into competition later that week, if that day is too close to competition, then you're going to have left a percentage of whatever they could do on the field of play in the weight room. And so that's one of the big, obviously that's our whole job, is to make sure that they get as close to 100% as they can on the field. So that's kind of how I break it down. Marsh?
All right. So, when we brought this topic up and I started thinking about it, the first 2 things that came to my mind was, stress and readiness. And I mean, you guys feel free to chime in whenever you guys want, but my biggest thing when it comes to stress is, like, I've been that coach, and I know coaches in the past that, you have an athlete come into the weight room and he's just slacking or she's slacking. And, coaches tend to use the word dickhead all the time, and just, they'll start throwing that around, just like, getting pissed at athletes or whatever. And we don't take the time to communicate and talk to them to see how they're doing, just like Sam said. And when it comes to stress, there could be so many different factors that take place, you know, family, relationships, school, all that stuff is going to play a factor. The one hard part in the private sector is, you know, you have an idea of like school schedules, right? You know, when typically finals are, but you know, in high school, I honestly don't even remember how many freaking tests they take. And I feel like they take tests and quizzes every week and they're just kind of stressed out and bogged down by it. But, you know, normally in the school year, if we're in the college setting, as you guys know, it's when you have like finals week, you usually give them that week off so they can just focus on school. You're not going to test them that week or anything like that. You usually test them like the week before, give them that week off so they can focus on their studies, you know, and then, you know, get back into summer training or whatever time of year it is. Um, that little timing and scheduling is a lot easier when you're in the school setting because you'll understand the school schedules, you'll plan everything around that, right? In the private sector, it's just a little bit more tough just because you don't know. Obviously, it comes down to communication and talking to your athletes, which I think is a little bit easier in the private sector because you know you get a lot more one-on-ones and one-on-threes and whatever, and you can actually talk to an athlete and get to know them a little bit better, opposed to like the large groups. I mean, even when we had like 100 athletes, you still talk to them and get to know them. But the biggest issue I have when it comes to stress is coaches that are big into like data and like want to know numbers and like want to know how their athletes are you know going week to week, day to day, whatever. um I think they talk about how they want to know what factors are taking place and like what readiness their athlete is really at. Like in the past, we've used systems that would tell you, you know, green, yellow, red on the readiness scale of your athlete, right? Let's say we're in college and Saturday football game, Friday, you have the starting quarterback that's in red. Are you going to go tell that quarterback that he's in the red and, you know, it doesn't look like he should be playing tomorrow because he's not on the readiness scale, he's not green? No, I've never seen it happen in the past. I don't know if you guys have seen that and you guys can object. I would love to hear it. I would love to hear anybody talk about it. But you know, the same thing happens when we talk about catapult. And I've heard about coaches talking to, you know, the sport coach and just, hey, we should, you know, pull back on so and so, you know, because this and this and this on these factors, whatever the catapult readings that they're looking at or whatever the case may be. And, you know, sometimes coaches, you know, adhere to it and they're like, yeah, let's pull, you know, John Smith out, let him rest, let him get back into the readiness zone or whatever. But sometimes just like, no, we got to go. If they're not ready, they got to get ready. It goes back to that saying, you know, was this like stay ready so you never have to get ready or whatever. You know, coaches are always going to push their athletes to their full potential or to their max potential. But now that we have these like scientific data numbers that give us, you know, readings and readiness scales and stuff like that, I feel like a lot of the times that we're ignoring those things and we don't utilize it like we say we're going to. And I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but you know, have you guys ever seen or heard of an instance where it actually was like, oh, okay, this person's in the red. Let's tell this person, let's not let them play tomorrow.
I think you hit it on the head. I mean, you're not going to tell someone that they're not ready and even put that's one little ounce of doubt in their mind. Who gives a shit how they feel at that point? Because it's like that's what you do. You perform under high stress situations at that point. And so it's the work that you do to prepare for handling that high stress situation, I think. I think it gets a little bit more into how you how you said, kind of like going throughout and looking at that day to day to day to day. I think it's also effective to kind of look at sport practices like that too. Like where if I've been in places where we didn't have money for catapult or anything like that, where we couldn't really track like distance that they ran or anything like that. So there was a coach who went to a practice, like they went to a volleyball practice and counted how many times one person jumped, and then counted how many times, like how many different people jumped, or they looked at video for how many times they jumped in a game. And so it was like, it turns out that they're jumping like 3 times as often in practice as they were in a game. And so it was like, of course, they were a little bit shot when they went into the game because they just jumped 150 times the day before. But I think you hit it right on the head with the green, yellow, red stuff.
What do you think, Aaron?
I never had that much experience with that, but just from hearing people who have, it just seems like it's that communication with that coach of just understanding. Like usually, like once that sport coach buys in, it gets a lot easier for them to be able to have that communication if in practice is, hey, like you said, John Smith is ready. We should probably cut some reps if it's an indie, maybe on 7-on-7, I'm going off like a football practice or some teams. But I also think it's that easier once that communication with that sport coach and that trust of that coach to us of realizing, hey, athlete B was in red all week, and guess what happened in his game? He pulled a hamstring, or this athlete was yellow, red, red, or he was green. Then you guys pushed him, and like you said, he had 100 reps in practice. The next day, you can't put him back at 100 or like that. Like he had like 8-4 full speed reps. I think it's just that what I've heard and had the communication with the coaches who are user are that once a sport coach buys in and trusts it, it gets a lot easier. So, like I said, that's just my experience and my communication with coaches who have had really good success with it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like one of the most important things is communication. Obviously, most sports coaches, if they're handed a strength coach or if they hire said strength coach, like you're there for a reason and you should kind of educate them as much as you can. I mean, we've talked about education a lot on multiple podcasts. And I mean, if we don't educate the people that we're working with or working for, then we're doing a disservice to our athletes. We're doing a disservice to the whole team. I mean, I think the biggest thing, when I'm programming, obviously I got to take in consideration, school semesters and like where we're at and what we need to get done. Obviously, if we're in season, off season, but communicating like Sam talked about with their athlete and knowing how they're doing and actually talking and hearing what they're talking about and how they're feeling is very important. Don't just disregard people's feelings, and then really try to monitor their readiness system the best as you can. But, I think if we're going to do the readiness system and see where they're at day to day, week by week, really pay attention to that, communicate to the athlete and try to, back off. I mean, this goes over to what Sam was talking about, like the CNS and like the high low, if they're like on Mondays, we usually squat after, and like if we're in season, we squat on Monday, give them Sunday off. We squat on Monday. And if the guy was in the yellow or a red, like, hey, let's back off. Obviously they don't need to squat as heavy. They had a lot of reps. That's another conversation too, is like, if we're talking and looking at just like the rep sheet, starting quarterback had 120 snaps or whatever. And then we look at Joe Schmo that had 25 snaps, but the quarterback comes in kind of banged up, let's, back off a little bit. And how some athletes are, man, they're just going to push no matter what. Like Mason, right? If he comes into the weight room, he's going to train his butt off no matter what. He's not going to just take a day off. He's not going to, he's still going to be a great leader every single time he came into the weight room. But, you'll have somebody that comes in, only had like 25 snaps and they're acting like the weight of the world is on their shoulders. And if you look at that sheet and you just kind of jump to conclusions and not communicate to the athlete, you might just assume that the person's just kind of taking advantage of the day and not trying to train or whatever. I think it's a slippery slope, honestly. Like some guys are going to get away with stuff, and, like we have to do the best that we can in our positions to get the max out of our athlete and push them to their full potential. But how do we do that when, if somebody's just kind of being a dickhead and not really communicating, or just trying to tell you what you want to hear just so they can kind of get out of the lift for the day? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you know the difference and how do you kind of figure that out?
Well, it's a slippery slope on both sides. Like if you push them too hard, then someone, if you push too hard consistently all the time, something's going to break. But if you back off too much, then you're going to let people be lazy. And it kind of depends a little bit on the athlete's mental fortitude, like you said, kind of their ability to handle stress and be able to move forward and still train and still feel good and convince themselves that they feel good, or what they're doing outside of the weight room in practice. Are they getting enough sleep? Are they getting enough to eat? Are the guys who want to kind of be lazy and dog it a little bit, are they going to bed at 3 a.m. and only eating Doritos and Mountain Dew? Like it depends on an individual basis, but you can't back off too much, where you have to kind of hold the line. And there are times when you push and there are times when you hold them back a little bit, but you have to stay even keel throughout the entire process, because if you lean too far to each way, then it starts getting to be a negative consequence from it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the toughest parts of our positions, but I mean, no matter what, it's always going to go back to education. It's always going to go back to communication. And I think if we try to be masters of those two, then we'll always be doing a great job in strength and conditioning.
There's another thing that I think we touched on it a little bit, but looking at the amount of snaps that someone gets and how they feel with that and stuff like that, almost down south, I was kind of starting to look at sport practices as kind of normal training sessions. Like, is this a high CNS day? Is this a low CNS day? Spoiler, all sport practices are high CNS days, and they have them every day. But it's like, if you're going to have a football coach who wants to practice and use their entire time as long as they're allowed, and just push their kids throughout the entire process, and they have like the different rounds and different whatever, like where they're split up and they have indie stuff. Like, what are they doing at their indie stuff? Are they just going like go until they don't have enough time? Or are they saying like, all right, let's go through 3 rounds, make sure everyone gets it, make sure everyone gets solid reps at this station, and then send them on or move on to the next section of practice? Or are they going to say, no, we're getting as many reps as we possibly can, and then you're not sure about the quality of reps, but the quantity is just through the roof, So it's just kind of taking a little bit of a thought process. It's weird for sport coaches as much as it is like for us to even look at the different drills and things and just say like, oh, well, how many sets versus how many reps did they do for this drill in that practice, or something like that. It's something weird to think about that can actually help balance everything out for the athlete when you need it.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I think that was a good topic. We'd love to hear some comments and please share our information. Let's get this thing talking about. Let's figure out what everyone likes to see and what they want to hear. Thanks again. This is the Strength and Knowledge Podcast.